Okay, so get this, right? Like imagine a newborn infant.
Uh,
That very first like flicker of sensation, you know.
yeah.
Well, William James, uh, he suggested this really wild idea,
Yeah.
that initial feeling, like the rawest this.
Hmm.
He's just saying it's not just some simple like input from the senses. It is the baby's entire universe.
Wow.
And within that one, this, he's saying, like crazy enough are the seeds of all the ways we understand things, like objectivity, unity,
Hmm.
even cause and effect.
Oh.
It's like a whole world, but in a single moment,
Yeah.
like a pure encounter with something.
You know, what really gets me about James's idea is how he sees this very first sensation as the foundation for everything we understand later on.
Yeah.
This, as he calls it, mere this. It's not just like a blank slate waiting to be filled. It already has these big qualities built in, but not in a way we can really grasp yet.
Right.
It's a deep thought, you know,
Yeah.
that the very first bit of awareness already holds the potential for how we'll see reality.
Exactly. And in this deep dive, that's what we're going to explore. We're going on a journey into sensation itself, into perception, and how we as humans actually come to know the world around us.
Big stuff.
All inspired by your curiosity, and mainly from William James's work, The Principles of Psychology, Volume 2.
Ah, a classic.
Think about it. How does that seemingly simple infant experience turn into the world you and I perceive? That's our mission today. And let me tell you, there are some real surprises along the way.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like James suggests, this the starting point, the one confused fact, as he puts it, probably has a real physical side to it.
Okay.
It's all those nerve signals, right? Coming in from all the sensory organs, hitting the brain all at once, like this massive undifferentiated input. And that's the infant's first universe.
But it doesn't stay unified for long.
Right, of course.
As the infant grows, those nerve signals, they become more distinct.
Yeah.
The pathways in the brain, they get established. And this one experience, it starts to break apart, you know.
Mhm.
It becomes many facts and all
Wow.
these qualities. What started as a present this
Mhm.
becomes a past that, and it's full of all these new attributes we're discovering.
And if we think about the principles James lays out in those earlier chapters, it clicks.
Yeah.
He talks about the mind being actively shaped by experiences, right? So this move from that early kind of mushy sameness to more complexity, it makes sense in the context of development.
This brings us to, some really big debates about sensation itself. Like throughout history, thinkers have had some wildly different views.
Oh, yeah.
You had Locke's followers. They tried to build up like all of complex thought just from basic sensations, all clustered together.
Which, as James points out, didn't really work. Just having more sensations doesn't automatically give you understanding, does it? There's got to be more to it.
Exactly. And then there were Plato's early students. They almost went the opposite direction. Basically dismissed sensation entirely. Yeah, like something base, corporeal, not cognitive at all. He even says vile.
Wow.
Yeah, like too tied to the physical world to give you like real knowledge.
So where'd they think knowledge came from?
For them, it was all in a more abstract intellectual place.
Ah.
And more recently, you have the neo-Hegelian view. They almost get rid of sensation altogether.
Oh.
All about the relations. Sometimes even relations without like things to be related.
That's tough to picture.
It's like trying to understand a story, but only focusing on the grammar. No characters, no plot.
Ah, got it.
The main takeaway here is that even a sensation, something so basic, it's not simple at all.
Mhm.
There's a lot of depth when you unpack it.
And it's so important to see that a sensation, even one that's like clearly caused by something outside of us, isn't just determined by that trigger.
Okay.
Like a light hitting the retina.
Yeah.
It's not just about the light.
What else is there?
Well, James emphasizes the whole constitution of the nervous system matters, and the state it's in at that moment.
So like,
Past experiences, what you're paying attention to, even like your overall physical condition. All that plays into how you actually perceive that light.
that's wild. So it's not a one-to-one thing. It's more like,
It's a process, it's not
Yeah.
just the stimulus, it's you, the whole
Yeah.
package.
yeah. This makes me think about sensory contrast, like how bright something seems or its color. It changes based on what's around it.
Right. Like, if you stare at a bright color for a while, then look at something neutral. You'll see that after image, the opposite color.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how different theories try to explain this. Helmholtz, he said the neural process, the actual sensation, it doesn't change. It's our interpretation that's different.
So it's all in our heads.
Well, for Helmholtz, yeah.
Yeah.
The contrast, it's mainly psychological, how the brain makes sense of the data.
Okay. But then there's Herring,
Hmm.
and he's saying,
Hearing says the process, the sensation itself, that changes because of changes in the retina.
so for him, it's physical.
More directly, yeah.
Yeah.
The contrast is physiological.
And James gives these examples where the contrast, it it seems to disappear in certain visual situations,
Hmm.
like a colored patch on a really busy background.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The psychological view might say we start to see that patch as a separate thing, and we stop comparing it. But the physiological view might say the contrast is still happening, but we can't see the changes anymore. They're too small.
It really gets at this core question, you know? Does perception come from our physical makeup or from how our minds interpret things?
It shows that what we perceive isn't just a recording of the world, but it's our system actively working on it, interpreting, even maybe changing the signals.
Absolutely. It's you in the world, not just you observing the world.
So let's talk about knowing, like knowing something versus just being aware of it. James uses a cool example. Seeing a place for the first time. You see this new place, even if you've touched and felt your own body a lot. But just seeing it, you don't automatically know how that thing you see relates to, say, your hand.
Right.
That connection comes later.
Through experience, yeah.
Exactly. When a baby tries to grab the moon, it's not that they don't see distance. It's that they haven't learned what that visual cue means for reaching.
They don't know how much effort it takes to actually get there.
And there's that example of a patient who could see again after having cataracts. They'd reach for things far away like they were right there.
Right, because their brain hadn't connected the new visual input with their sense of touch.
And there's this quote from Professor Janet that James uses. It's perfect.
What's it say?
To be touched means for him to receive an impression without first making a movement.
So because their eye is now getting this impression from far away, it's like
They can only think of it as touching them.
powerful stuff. It shows how our existing knowledge, our language, shapes how we take in new sensory stuff.
It really highlights the role of learning.
Yeah.
We're not passive receivers. We're always trying to fit new sensations into what we already know.
We're constantly building the world as we perceive it through experience.
Now, let's talk about mental imagery. Hume, that famous philosopher, he said impressions, the direct sensory stuff and ideas, memories, imagination, they only differ in how strong and vivid they are.
Okay.
He's basically saying an idea is just a weaker copy of an impression, like a faded photograph.
Interesting.
But James doesn't buy it, and for good reason. Like, think about it. When you remember something you wrote, can you really picture every word?
Hmm.
Or a song, can you hear every note perfectly in your mind? Probably not.
Yeah, you're right.
I bet Hume himself, when he thought about his own books, didn't have a perfect image of every page.
I guess even brilliant minds can miss things when they're stuck on a theory. And it's funny that, as James points out, it was the empiricists, Hume's own people, who often made these kinds of mistakes, They'd miss basic facts about consciousness that their spiritualistic opponents were actually getting right.
Huxley, he flat out disagreed with Hume. He said visualizing something and being able to recognize it aren't the same thing. You can know a face instantly, but not be able to picture it clearly in your mind.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then there are these amazing individual differences in mental imagery.
Hmm.
James talks about people who can combine more in their perception than two eyes can even see, like this touch sight, where they can visualize every part of an object, like a globe, all at once.
That's incredible.
He even describes this dream he had where he could mentally embrace a whole sphere, experiencing it from the inside.
Wow. So it's like our internal sensory worlds are so different. Some have this richness, this panoramic view, and others, they struggle to form any clear image at all.
Right. He talks about the poor visualizer who says their memories are like faint images seen through fog. They can't picture faces clearly, even familiar ones. And their idea of something like a breakfast table, it's just vague. They might know intellectually there are 10 chairs, but they can't actually see them in their mind.
Really highlights how much mental imagery varies. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Not at all. And it's not just visual imagery either. Think about how other senses can fill in when one is missing. James talks about people who are completely blind but can still read by tracing the letters with their fingers.
Oh, wow.
It's the motor image at work. The feeling of those movements, somehow it gives them the understanding of the words. Charcot, he said it was like they were reading by writing.
So it's like our senses and our actions are linked so deeply, the brain can use one to make up for the other.
It shows that our understanding isn't tied to one sense only.
Right. We can access it in different ways, using these connections between different kinds of experiences.
This brings us to the connection between how we move our mouths when we speak and our verbal thoughts. Stricker, he noticed these tiny movements of the larynx, tongue, lips. He called it the twitter of the organs.
Oh, me? Yeah.
And these movements, they happen even when we're just remembering words, not speaking out loud.
Interesting.
So he suggested that these tiny unconscious movements, they might be the material of our verbal thought itself.
The physical action of speaking, but internalized.
Right. And he did this experiment where keeping the mouth open made it harder to imagine lip sounds like B or P.
Wow.
Like physically blocking the movement also blocked the mental image.
Makes sense.
Now, Stricker himself, he said he didn't have any auditory image, like a sound in his head, when he thought verbally. But James says we shouldn't generalize from one person.
Yeah, of course.
It's probably different for everyone. Some might use more auditory imagery, some more of the physical feeling, even visual imagery maybe.
This is fascinating because it makes you wonder, what is our inner speech really like? You know? Is it sound-based? Is it feeling-based? It's so subjective.
Absolutely. Now think about this. The same sensory input can be perceived as different things depending on how we think about it.
Okay.
Like imagine musicians pretending to play, but not actually touching their instruments.
Right.
People listening often say they hear faint sounds, even though there's no actual sound.
That's wild. It's like our minds are filling in what we expect to be there.
Exactly. And it's not just sound. A patient before surgery might report feeling the surgeon's knife before it touches them.
Yeah, that anticipation.
And visually, there are tons of examples where the same thing can be seen in totally different ways, like those illusions where it's a vase but also two faces.
Ah, yeah, those are classic.
So this implies that maybe the difference between what we imagine and what we feel isn't so clear-cut. The brain processes might be more intertwined.
Yeah, so it's not like imagination is over here and sensation is over there, totally separate.
Right. And while it's probably not our actual senses being involved when we imagine, maybe the cortex can influence them somehow.
It's like the brain is always interpreting and shaping what it gets, and what's real versus imagined isn't so simple.
And this active role of the mind, it gets even clearer with illusions of movement. Like when our eyes move accidentally, it can feel like things are moving when they're not.
Oh, yeah. The basic sensation of movement, that's just an image moving on the retina. But at first, we don't know if it's the object or our eyes that are moving.
Right.
We learn that through some simple rules, basically. If we feel movement on the retina but don't feel our eyes moving, then we think the object is moving.
And if we feel our eyes moving but no retinal movement, then we see the object as still.
Exactly. And we also perceive things as still if we feel both retinal movement and eye movement, or if we feel neither.
So our brain is deciding what's moving based on this relationship between the visual input and our own eye movements.
And it's not always conscious either, which can lead to some funny mix-ups.
Like what?
If you stare at something that's continuously moving, like a waterfall, your eyes will naturally follow it. And even after it stops, your eyes might keep doing these tiny back and forth movements. But you're not aware of them. So when you look at something still, it can feel like it's moving in the opposite direction.
Because your brain thinks, oh, retinal movement, but my eyes aren't moving to follow it, so that thing must be moving.
Exactly. It's trying to make sense of the data even when it's messed up by our own body.
Our brains are always working overtime.
Yeah.
And the position of our eyes also affects how near or far things seem, especially with both eyes, right?
Binocular vision. When we focus on something close up and then cover one eye, that eye will drift outwards a bit. And when you uncover it, it has to move back into focus. This little change can make it seem like things get nearer when you use both eyes again, and farther when you go back to one eye.
That's so weird.
Yeah, and James even points out that for people with weak eye muscles, the illusion might be reversed.
So these tiny physical differences between people can really change how they see the world.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about something a little more unusual: pseudo-hallucinations.
Okay.
These are like vivid mental images, but they have a different feel than our normal memories or fantasies. They're way more vivid, super detailed, more stable too, and they just pop up. out of nowhere. And there's this lack of control that you usually have with your imagination.
Like you can't just make them appear.
Right. And they might feel projected outwards, but they don't have that sense of realness that true hallucinations do.
It's like somewhere between imagination and actual hallucination.
Yeah, and James says a lot of those voices people hear, even if they're not, delusional, might be pseudo-hallucinations.
They're inner, but not like our normal inner speech.
Right, there's a difference.
It's important to see this whole range of inner experiences. From our thoughts to these more intense pseudo-hallucinations and then full-blown hallucinations.
Absolutely. And with true hallucinations, Benet's work with hypnosis is really fascinating. He found that if you suggest an image to someone under hypnosis, like General Grant's photograph, and then you put that suggestion on a real but neutral thing, like a dot,
Okay.
they'll report seeing the photo, not the dot.
Wow.
And the key here is that neutral thing, the dot. Benet called it the point de repère, like a reference point that makes the image feel real.
So it's like without that anchor, it might just stay a thought.
And he suggested that this need for a physical anchor, it's not just in hypnosis. It might be in a lot of hallucinations people with mental illness experience.
So like when they only hear voices on one side or see things with only one eye open.
Right. And it's been found that in these cases, there might be some physical irritation or something in the periphery, like in the ear or the eye.
And that sets off a signal.
Right. And the brain, because it's not working quite right, it takes that signal and dresses it up with ideas. It becomes an illusion.
That's really interesting.
Benet even proposed this bigger theory that maybe all hallucinations start in the periphery, like a common root for hallucination, illusion, even normal perception.
He's trying to tie it all together.
Yeah. He's saying that vividness, that sense of realness, it comes from a trace of a signal from those peripheral nerves. And this triggers a big brain response, making it feel external.
And what we actually perceive,
Yeah.
the object, that depends on which pathways get activated. Both the senses and the mind contribute.
And get this. Benet says we can't tell the difference between these contributions just by looking inwards.
So we're not aware of how much is coming from the senses versus the mind.
Right, and how we interpret it shows if the brain reacted normally or abnormally to the initial impression.
So even normal perception might have this hidden root in the body.
It really blurs the lines, doesn't it?
It does. Now, let's talk about how fast we form complex perceptions. James mentions these experiments where they measured reading speed and memory to see this. They'd give someone a paragraph, let them read it for a certain time, then they'd write down what they remembered.
So reading speed would show how fast they could grasp the new info, not just their general reading skill.
Right. And what's surprising is that some super accomplished people, scientists and writers, they were actually slow readers in these tests.
Huh. So it's not just about how fast you take in information, but what you do with it.
Exactly. It challenges the idea that faster equals smarter. Some people might take longer, but they get a deeper understanding.
It makes you think about all this emphasis on speed reading, Like maybe we're missing out on the value of slowing down and really absorbing things.
Maybe we are. It's about balance, right? Speed and depth.
Absolutely. All right, let's move into something very, very spatial. Our sense of space itself.
Okay.
James starts with this idea of a feeling of crude extensity. He says it's in a lot of our senses. Hearing, touch, sight, even pain.
Okay.
Think about thunder, right? Feels much bigger, more spread out than a pencil squeak. Or a warm bath versus a pinprick. Even pain can feel more or less big, depending on where it is. And then there's dizziness and that feeling of motion, all very spatial.
And what about muscle sense? Like, does that play a role?
That was debated back then, but it feels like using big muscles, like in your leg, feels more spatially big than, say, a tiny muscle in your face.
Oh, that makes sense.
But James points out there's not always a clear connection between how big a feeling seems and the size of the organ involved.
Like our eyes and ears are small, but we see and hear huge things.
Exactly. And even within one organ, like the eye, something at the edge of your vision seems smaller than if you look right at it.
Ah, right.
And if you touch two spots on your skin that are the same distance apart, they can feel farther apart in some areas, like lines on your face seem to spread out near your mouth.
Exactly. Our sense of space isn't just a map of the physical world onto our senses. There's more to it.
Lots more. And then there's Wundt. He came up with this idea of local signs. He's saying each spot on your skin, even your organs, it has a unique feeling that comes from its location. And this feeling is different from knowing where it is.
So it's like A quality of the sensation itself.
Exactly. Like if you press on your cheek and then your palm, same pressure, it feels different.
Yeah, I get that.
And if you pay attention, even close points on your skin feel a little different. As you move your finger, the feeling changes smoothly, even if the touch is the same.
It's like a gradient of feeling.
And even matching points on opposite sides of your body, they don't feel identical. It's not just that we know they're different places, the feeling itself is different.
That's wild.
So for Wundt, each point has this local sign, this unique quality that helps tell us where it is.
Okay, but how does one spot on the skin actually suggest its location?
Well, James says it's usually not by remembering a line or path, unless we've traced it a lot before. Like on your back, you might just feel a general area, not a precise spot.
But on our hands and lips and tongue, it's different, right?
Yeah, we have this instinct to move to a more sensitive spot. Like your hand goes over an object so your fingertips can feel it.
Right.
Or your foot, if something touches your sole, you move it so your toes can investigate. So we create these lines of habitual passage and we remember them.
So moving around and exploring is actually building our sense of space.
Totally. But even with all this direction info from joints, skin, eyes, James says it doesn't mean these feelings are automatically comparable, you know?
Like, we might not instantly see them as all belonging to the same space.
Right. Our inner ear gives us direction too, but is that directly comparable to what we see or touch? It's not a given. The brain has to put it all together.
It's doing so much work behind the scenes.
Hmm.
And how do we extend this direction feeling like beyond our skin into the world?
Jones says it needs to become an object for another sense, mainly sight. For blind folks, it's touch and movement. Their hand creates a sphere of space around them.
And as they move, that space expands. It gets its spatial meaning from the inner ear and from touching fixed objects.
Right. And James asks, would that kind of space knowledge feel smooth or more jointed, built up from bits?
Interesting question. It's different from how someone with sight might imagine a large space.
They might see it as parts or even shrink it down mentally like a map.
Now, Helmholtz, he had this radical view of space. He said only qualities like color are truly sensations.
Meaning they're directly given by the senses.
But things like distance, size, shape, direction, they're not sensed directly, they're learned.
He's saying they come from our habits and experience in the world.
Wow. So we're not born with a sense of space, we build it.
He even says there's no one eye movement or muscle thing that's inherently linked to a specific space perception.
So it's all in the mind.
He thinks so. Our interactions with the world are what shape how we see space.
Huh. This makes me think about how we judge if something is one object or two, and how that connects to seeing its direction.
Oh, yeah. Jane says these judgments are, like, linked. Seeing things in the same direction implies they're coming from the same origin point.
Like somewhere between our eyes.
Right, which is the idea behind the cyclopean eye and Herring's theory of identical retinal points.
And if the images fall on different points on our retinas, we should see double.
Yeah, that's double vision. Like, when your eyes are focused, close up, but there's something far away.
This is all so intricate. Our eyes and brain working together to figure out where things are in space.
Amazing system, isn't it?
Now, there's this idea that illusions disappear when we understand them, right?
Right.
But James says, not so fast.
Ah,
Think about those flashes of light you see when you press your eye, or after images, or reflections in a mirror.
okay, yeah.
We know they're not real objects, but they still seem to be somewhere specific in space.
We can't just will them away even though we understand them.
If we could, our whole perception would be messed up.
Right.
It shows that our senses, they have their own kind of reality, even when our mind knows better.
So it's not all under conscious control.
And James, he then goes on to categorize some of the weird illusions that are left over, like after images that get distorted on slanted surfaces, and those illusions where depth is reversed, pseudoscopic ones.
Okay.
So with the after images, there's this research by Volkmann. He found that if you even imagine a wall tilted in a picture, an after image you throw onto it will be distorted.
So it's like your imagination of the slant affects the after image.
And if you do it with an actual signboard painted with perspective, the after image will have angled lines, even though the original image was a straight cross.
Huh. It's like perspective in reverse.
It shows how our brain wants to make sense of things spatially, even when it's just an after image.
Trying to fit it into the 3D world.
And then there are these cases where the same retinal image can make us see different things.
Mm-hmm.
After images, masks, diagrams. It means the image itself doesn't have a fixed meaning.
It's all about how we interpret it.
If form and length were just retinal, then a rectangle shouldn't look different depending on the context.
Yeah.
And lines shouldn't seem to change length. And if 3D relief was just optical, it shouldn't flip back and forth when the image stays the same.
This is a big problem for anyone who says there's no such thing as a sensation of space.
Exactly. It means our perception of these things is much more than just the image on the eye.
Now, there's this idea of complementary reproduction in perception. This is where a partial image can trigger a whole bunch of sensations because of how our nervous system works.
We see more than what's actually there.
Right. Like a few dots and lines can make us see a face. We fill in the missing parts based on what we know faces look like.
And James says these filled-in parts, they're sensations too, as long as we're experiencing them.
But they might not always be there, and we can sometimes get rid of them if we look closely.
Like our depth perception with one eye, that's mostly this filling in based on experience.
Right.
And these habits of seeing things in space, they can be so strong that they even override our knowledge.
Yeah.
Like different objects can create the same image, and small things, even what we want to see, can change how we perceive it.
It's amazing how active our perception is.
Totally. Now, James, he really goes after this idea of the mind creating space. He calls it a mythological view.
Like the Kantian idea.
Right. He says he has no experience of this mental factory making space.
He's saying space is more fundamental than that.
Exactly. He argues against this two-stage model where first we have non-spatial sensations, then the mind makes them spatial.
He thinks we experience space directly.
Right. For him, the form of something is felt just as immediately as its color. He does say our higher mind plays a role, like comparing and measuring space.
But he sees that as working with existing spatial sensations, not creating them from scratch.
Right. He says space perception uses all sorts of different feelings, and this proves there's no one optical sensation that has, like, inherent spatial form.
It's the combination that matters.
Exactly. And he points out how movement messes with our measurements of the visual field, which argues against the idea that just light itself feels spatial.
And he says it's not just movement.